the very one who came with the problem cannot be the very person who can come with your solution.
Welcome to the show. My name is Imelda Wanyirigira, and this is Inspire. I have a very, very special guest today. And would you please introduce yourself to the viewer?
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Marta, for inviting me into this session. My name is Kena. I'm in fact just someone who happened to be interested in what's happening into our continent, in our history, in our past, and in fact in our present, and trying to make sense of whatever I've received so far in terms of information from school, from many other sources, and trying to understand where the continent is going. And that the main driver that I have today to try and understand and try and share with all the people who I meet around to know where we can fit together into building something that can be credible for the whole continent, for our community in Africa as well as outside Africa. So that's basically what I'm doing today.
Excellent, excellent. Kenny, our culture believes that being rich is being able to provide to the poor, and that's really the essence of someone being rich. Mm-hmm. It's a good thing. But again, Africa has been independent since, I think, 1960s. But since then, Africa has been on aid. They have been receiving aid and support from the international organizations, from developed countries. So this culture of rich people donating to the poor has become part of us Africans actually being recipients every time. And this is something really I thought we should talk about today. And most people think that, well, Africa is independent, but there is this mental slavery where we think that we should be recipients every time. Actually, that part of financial freedom doesn't exist. Basically, we are still slaves when it comes to finances and and money. What do you think about that?
In fact, to my view, that's the very reason why we need to understand where we stand today, and in fact, where we are coming from. Because when we look at what's happening since the independence, what's happening in Africa is almost everywhere the same kind of story. And it points to exactly what has happened to the continent. And in fact, we need to understand what we were before, what has happened to us, and what do we make as in terms of how do we make sense of what we are today in terms in order to make sure that we find our ground and define the way forward so that we can get out of what we are today. It's not by accident if today almost all the countries in Africa are behaving almost the same, with some differences between countries, some more or less becoming financially independent, but the reality is more or less the same everywhere. I still remember I was reading a book whereby a European was coming into Africa 4 centuries before. And what he said was, I walked through the continent and I never saw anywhere someone being poor, someone being thirsty, hungry, anyone being like someone without house or anything like that. Because the culture that we in Africa have been building in terms of civilization for centuries and for years was based on sharing within community and doing a proper split. I mean, in French we call it répartition. How to share with everybody, to share the benefit of our economic activity among all the members of our community. What we have today is something totally different. We are now characterized by individualism, which is something coming from a foreign civilization, which has just been imposed on us since the confrontation between our culture and the foreign culture that happened to be the one who took us into slavery and colonization. So do we really need to start crying upon what has happened to us? No, this is not the way forward. I mean, we need to understand what has happened, but we need to acknowledge what kind of mechanism has been used to put us where we are today and understand where we need to work so that we can find our way out of this mechanism so that we can now find our freedom. Otherwise, we'll still be struggling, trying to find the solution through those people who, in fact, are the very one who came with the problem, cannot be the very person who can come with your solution. You need to find your solution by your own and impose respect. That's what we have. I mean, we've been failing to do so far. Luckily enough, there are now many people across the continent, and the youth especially is now claiming for that freedom. And more voices are now making clear this needs for Africa to now work by itself the way out into this real freedom. But true, there's a kind of mental slavery that makes us kind of dependent on hate, dependent on those very people who put us into the situation where we are today. And that's the problem today to the continent.
It is a big problem indeed. And I was wondering how are we going to go forward? I mean, how? Because we are relying on donation. Each country, Africa, over 50 years, Africa has been a recipient of $1 trillion, US dollars, but still there's no impact, no change, no visible change. Do we really need aid?
In fact, before even answering why, if we really need aid, we need to understand how it works and why it is working this way. We mentioned the mental slavery or the psychological slavery. And in fact, what has happened is that today, knowingly or without knowing it, there's a certain sense of understanding that Africa, of the Black people that we are today, seems to be hating itself. Why? Because when you look at the way we behave in certain sense, we do things like we are not really confident. We have lost something like self-esteem. And when people lose self-esteem, they tend to be unable to compete with other people who have a strong self-esteem. And that's what has happened during all these 500 years of slavery / colonization. There have been many mechanisms that has been used to destroy the self-esteem that Africa population, I mean, Black population can be having, whereas in Africa or outside Africa, and wherever you go outside the continent, you will still see the same kind of situation. The reality is we have lost something critical that could help us rebuild our engine, rebuild our ability to define our future, to define where we want to go and to define and control our destiny. And so long as we have not solved this situation, we will still be behaving like people with a slave mentality, trying to rely on the very people who have put us into this situation. And we tend to forget that this situation has not been conducted out of moral kind of imperatives. It was not moral, it was economic. And since it's economic, it cannot stop until you take your destiny in your own hands. So long as you don't take your destiny in your own hands, you'll still be subject to this kind of domination one way or another. And today, one of these strings that has been used to maintain Africa into this kind of domination is the aid that has been used. The way this aid is expressed, defined, and given still maintain most of our countries in the situation whereby there's no way out. And in fact, it also kind of define the way the different straits of the population will behave among each other. The one in top of power will behave in a certain way with the one in the bottom end of the society, the
That's right.
confrontation will still remain as open as it was before independence, as if the colonial people were still there. This kind of situation will destructure the whole society in certain way that the ability to work together as one and create a commune future will just be lost. And this is mainly because
Yeah, we've lost our self-esteem as Africans. What really upsets me is when I see someone who is really making making it in their lives, or like doing well. They like, okay, this one is like really European. They live a higher standard. So everybody's actually trying to climb that, to go to that standard of being European, American, trying to actually shift from Africa to Western, and that is where their income is taking them to. So you find that, we are losing ourselves, we are abandoning our culture. I mean, being a European, being an American is shown by your level of your income. You are literally abandoning your home because you have some money, because you have some, I mean, you have a good life and your children can afford to study abroad, and you can afford to go for medical attention abroad. So you're actually a European, American, you're actually living your continent, you're living your culture, you're living your country. What do you think? I think that's a very serious problem that we are facing today in Africa. And we actually mentioned to ourselves, this one, his level is really high. It's not our level. And actually that person also is feeling proud of not being this level. I'm going another level. But you're abandoning your home, you're abandoning your culture. That really makes me upset.
that's true. And in fact, from the little that I've been able to read from what happened during slavery time, for example,
Yeah.
you can hear of what happened between this slave that used to be in the working outside the house of the white people,
Mm.
and those slaves who are working, domestic slaves working inside the house. Seems like
Okay.
at certain level we are kind of replicating what happened between these two categories, wherever we are in
Yeah.
the continent or elsewhere, between our own, I mean, among the community. And that happened
Mm.
during slavery time. But I also heard of it happening during colonial time, when in some people, I'm from DRC, for example, and I know
Yeah.
for a fact that during colonial time, the Belgium were created a kind of a class of people called the so-called modernized, the so-called urbanized, the so-called educated people. But to be educated in that time was, I mean, equal to be like the white people. If
Mm-hmm.
you were called educated, you were doing everything like white people. And then
Okay.
because you were doing everything like white people, you became educated. I mean, you were seen like modern, like educated, like high class level. And they were doing that to differentiate people, to give privileges to those people who were doing everything like they wanted, because they wanted that clear separation, so that people can has, I mean, becoming like a white people became like aspirational. And we think that since colonial, I mean, since independence, all this has stopped. Reality is not. Why? Because school has not changed. The programs are still the same kind of program that used to be taught during colonial times, still kind of similar programs. We are taught to learn about everything that happens in Europe or in, yeah, I mean, in Western world, rather than what happened in our continent. We are taught about philosophy and thinkers of Western worlds, rather than what has been produced by our own people. So that at certain level, becoming educated, owning a degree, is equal as being like Western people, which now create a differentiation between guys who are educated and those who are perceived non-educated because they didn't go into this school system. When you add into that political parties, when you add into that religions and all that, you have all, I mean, many things put into forms to make sure that those people who are now doing it well are becoming more and more like Western people. But the main characteristic of this civilization that came into Africa or wherever we are in those in Africa and America to perpetrate slavery and colonization, they are characterized by one thing: individualism. They work on their own, for their own, and for them. Their belief is that one person will do it for himself, and if many people do it the same way, the community will become better, because they are all struggling on their own to find prosperity for themselves. But this is not what we used to have in Africa. Africa has always been built around community. All the values, all the economy, all the politics were all built around communities. Now imagine that.
Sorry, if I would interrupt you just a bit, do subscribe to this channel if you like. Could this mean that there is a conflict between culture and modernization?
I will not call it conflict between culture and modernization. There's a conflict between what the world is imposing upon Africa today and the very soul of our continent, of our culture. We were prosper before. We were modern before. We were even, when you look at true history, Africa has a time where imperial Africa was even stronger than what happened in Europe during the Dark Age in Europe, for example. So this was the modern time of Africa being on top of everything. That has happened. It doesn't mean that today we are not modern. We just need to find the right keys into the new world so that we don't lose our soul, but we find our grounds to define our future into what we are. But working as we are working today, by hating ourselves unconsciously and trying to resemble someone else, and denying our own identity, will not make it, because the only thing that we'll do is we will try to resemble someone that we are not. We will never become that someone, and we'll still struggle to get there. And at the same time, we will disconnect completely from our own society, which will now create some other kind of issues among ourselves.
Yeah, and that's very scary for the future of our continent. For example, today, an African man opening a shop, even here in the UK where I am, and seeing another race opening the same shop. People, for example, Asian people, they usually support each other's businesses. But you find an African person really entering a shop of an African brother or sister, they don't go there. They prefer going somewhere else. They don't support each other's business. Why? Maybe they don't have confidence in what they are selling. They don't consume their own product made in Africa. And this is why, it's so scary, because we don't support ourselves. We don't appreciate what we have. We spend money buying expensive marks that are made by other people. Actually, the money is not not going to Africa. The money is going somewhere to the produce of that product. We Africans are spending so much to look so good in those big marks, but our brothers and sisters can also make something. Can't we support them? Can't we dress our own clothes? Can't we eat our own food? Can't we enjoy our own product? But we don't do that because we have that mentality of actually undervaluing ourselves. That's a very, very sad thing, and it is still happening today. So what is the future for Africa if we really keep that mentality?
In fact, that's true. And this is one of the only community when you can see that today, although you can see, or at the same time, people are struggling to recreate this kind of connection between amongst African community across the world, but it's still difficult. There's still a long way to get there. Why? Because we need to understand where exactly we've been beaten, which kind of battle we have lost that has created this situation for us to now hate ourselves to such extent that we don't support each other when when our brother is doing well on his business. We don't even feel proud of him. We feel jealous
Yeah.
sometimes. We're trying to undermine what he's doing, and we would rather support someone from another community rather than support someone from our own community. It happens among nationals from the same country in Africa, as well as among people from different countries within the same continent. And that's a real problem, because reality is Africa cannot be strong if it's still divided. These boundaries that we have today were just created out of a conference that took place in Western world. It was not our own decision. People have been divided on the grounds that they don't even understand. But today, we are still maintaining these divisions, not only among different countries, but even inside the countries among different so-called tribes, so-called cultures, that we
Yeah.
see differences where there are no differences. Why? Because
Yeah.
we've been taught that we have those differences. And the reality is we hate ourselves. We don't even know that we hate ourselves. We hate our skin color, we hate our nose, we hate our lips, we hate our languages, we hate the way we dress, we hate the way we eat, we hate the way, everything about black is something that most of the time, unconsciously, we hate it. And we need to start there. But why do we hate it? When somebody comes into your continent and starts driving a religion that says you black people were, uh, how do you call it in maudit, cursed by God, because
Yeah.
of Noah's sons who were, you know the story. Noah came into a land after the flood. He did some wine. He drank. He get drunk, and then one of his
Yeah.
sons saw him. The son was called Cam, and then that son is the father of all black people. And when this religion is telling you that all black people were cursed because of what their forefathers Cam did to his father Noah, I mean, one way or another, you hate yourself without even knowing it. This is how difficult it is to perceive it. You hate ourselves. We hate ourselves without even knowing it. And we don't even hate ourselves because we know, we know why we are hating ourselves. We hate ourselves just because we are black. And then at the end of the day, you look at your friend, your brother, as if he was your enemy. You rather support other communities, Western communities, rather than supporting your own brother, be it in your own country or outside in another country in Africa, which is a real problem. So long as we don't
Don't
understand
you
that,
think?
we'll still have difficult to get out of this situation. And we need to work on this. This is the first ground that we need to reclaim, win, so that we can now control our destiny.
Yeah, and no one can love you if you don't love yourself. No one can respect you if you don't respect yourself. No one can give you that value if you don't give it yourself. So we claim that we love Africa. We claim to be good Africans, but we don't actually love ourselves. We don't support each other. We have no confidence in ourselves. But I think it is time for Africans to reflect on our history, on our past, on what has been happening, and make a good move this time. Do it right.
This is true.
How possible that? Mm.
This is true. And in fact, just to go further on what I was saying, we are, just to show how far we don't even love, unconsciously we don't love ourselves. We are the only population community who can fight among each other based on ideas that are not even Africans. So we claim to be from this kind of political party, which is European, American, and so on and so forth. Kind of philosophy that is not even African, but we fight each other based on these lines. We fight each other based on religions that are even foreigner to our continent. They are not originated from our continent, but we fight each other on these lines, which means that we need to start there. We need to solve this situation first, because this is where we will understand through history, through our culture, even through our language, that we are the same people everywhere across the continent. There's no need to fight each other. We need to build boundaries. We need to build bridges between our people so that we reunite as a whole continent. We are the only one who don't even understand that in 20 years from now, this continent will be populated by more than 1.5 billion. This is a huge market. I mean, 70% of this population will be below 20. This is a huge market, not only for this time, for the time that happened, but for even 30 to 50 years later, because the younger the population is, the longer, I mean, the population growth will be, and the sustainability of that market will be. So the attractiveness of Africa is, I mean, it's there, it's known. But so as long as we don't understand that, we will be fighting each other while other people will start taking advantage. I mean, they've already been taking advantage of that long time before. They will continue taking advantage of that. We will still be sleeping on this, and we don't realize that we have the power, and we need to reactivate this power so that we now control our destiny. And this is where we need to start.
So how do we start? We really need to do it, but how?
Yes, one of the things that we need to start working on is through education, because this is one of the ground where we still, I mean, today, this is a fact, you can go wherever you want across the continent. Most of the program that we are taught in schools and in academics and all that are still programs that are not defined by Africa, So that's a problem, because we are westernized through school. So once you get out of school, your dream is to resemble Western people, not your own people. This is a problem. When you look at people in other continents, this is not what's happening to them, because even in school, they are not Westernized. They are localized. They take whatever they can take in terms of scientific information, they customize it into their own culture, and they drive forward. This is just like trees in the forest. If a tree doesn't have roots that goes deep in vertical direction, I mean, that tree cannot go as high as it can go, because the roots, when they are deep, vertically oriented, they give strength to the growth of the tree. And this is what we need to rebuild. And it starts by school. It starts by the places where we are building our mental mental of warrior. We need to rebuild it to our kids, to our population, rebuild confidence on ourselves, rebuild self-esteem, rebuild all that, so that now that, I mean, this world is a world of competition. We cannot survive this competition if we don't rebuild our self-esteem. This is not possible, because all these people we are fighting against, they have self-esteem, they have strong self-esteem. If you don't, you will not survive. And this is where we need to start. We need to rebuild this self-esteem, and it goes through education, rebuilding our culture, rebuilding our knowledge of our past. This is where we will now have the ground, solid grounds, to build where we want to go and control our destiny.
Yeah, definitely. I do agree with you. And if this is not done, you know what? We are going back to slavery. You can't be independent if you can't actually love what you have. If you can't love where you come from, you can't have a home. You don't love your home. You don't love where you come from. You belong somewhere, but actually don't belong there. So basically, you might end up being a slave, and also relying on others for finances, for whatever you want to appear in the community, however you want to look like. You know, we are educated. Some are even highly educated than us, but we should know where we come from. You just mentioned about roots growing vertically. We need to go back to our roots, I think.
Sure.
Bring that education, bring that knowledge to your continent, to your country. Make a difference. Be proud of where you come from. Otherwise, we actually belong nowhere. We have a big continent, rich in minerals, rich in all the resources, but we don't own it, we actually try to detach ourselves from where we come from to somewhere else that doesn't even give us that value. So we need to build our value, homegrown value of Africans. I'm concluding, but you should be the one concluding. Would you please give maybe 1 or 2 words of concluding? I shouldn't be concluding this.
In fact, you said it all. What we need to do is to make sure that we recreate what can give us the strength to go forward and control our destiny. And this will not happen until we create what's necessary we have to do. We need to have to recreate our self-esteem. We need to relook at what we're giving in terms of scholarship to our kids, academics to our youth. I mean, all these to make sure that at the end of the day, African people become proud again of himself, recreate this self-esteem, because then it can we realize that we have the power to create our own future. We have the power to create our own destiny. We have the power to control our resources. We have the power to control our markets. We have the power to decide where we want to go. We need
and we have the power to write our own history.
Exactly. What has happened to us did not happen because of moral consideration. It was economic consideration. No one in Europe decided to take a boat and come in Africa because they had moral needs. It was all economics. They wanted to have something that we have. We need to understand that we have what everybody wants. Once we understand that, we need to understand that we need to be proud of ourselves and now decide how we want to play with what we have, so that we now start building our own destiny, taking into account the world in which we are now living, and making sure that we can face this competition.
It's time proudly to build the Africa that we want.
Exactly.
I really thank you so much for being part of this conversation.
Thank you very much.
And I hope I'm speaking to Africans out there. This is for all of us. And this is the time to make a difference, to love where we come from, to go back to our roots and develop our continent and be proud of ourselves and make our ancestors proud of us, because we can't abandon our home. We can't abandon our home because we're educated, because we're in Europe, America, and feel like we are normal Africans. We are Africans, and Africa counts on us. Thank you, Ken, for this great conversation, and see you next time.
See you, thank you again, and thank you for everyone for listening and watching. The very one who came with the problem cannot be the very person who can come with your solution.